Alright troops, how are you doing? It's Rob here, and welcome to my review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, we finished the game on the 14th of May, and today's date is the 13th of June. Now, the reason we've left it so long to review this game is because normally, whenever we finish a game, depending on the game that we just played, I'm quite emotional. I'm mentally drained. And the reason for that is because whenever we play a game, I like to invest in it. I like to immerse myself in it, and as a result of that, I become very attached to it. I become attached to the story, to the characters, to the world, right? And then when we finish a game, there's this disconnect, right? And I start getting withdrawal symptoms, and at that point, I need to mentally decompress, and it normally takes me a few days to recover. Plus, if I was to review this game within 48 hours of completing it, I would be speaking from the heart and not the mind, and I want to be as objective as possible. So yeah. Now, it's going to become quite apparent within the first few minutes of this review what I'm going to give the game in terms of a score. Right? So I'm just going to give you guys the score right now, you know. I'm not going to keep you guys hanging until it gets minging. I love that quote from Still Game. Methadone Mick. Yeah, so I'm going to give the game an 11 out of 10. Now, I was sort of debating as to how I want to do this, right? Do I want to give it like a 10 plus? Or a 10 with a star next to it, or do I want to give it a golden 10? And I was like, nah, what's better than 10? 11, right? So, but this is going to be rare, guys. This might actually be the only 11 that I give a game on this channel, right? Because when I give a game an 11, it's 10 out of 10, right? A masterpiece across the board. But when I give it an 11, it means it takes the top spot. It is now my new favourite game. So when someone says to me, what's your favourite game? I will say Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And the reason I say that it's rare is because the top spot, i.e. my favourite game spot, has only changed hands 5 times in the past 28 years. So the first time that I actually counted or classed a game as my favourite was back in 1997, and it was the original Final Fantasy VII. Before then, that was the Sega Master System and the Sega Mega Drive years, right? And I was really young back then, guys, right? And nobody really took games seriously, right? Gaming was only something that you did when there was nothing else to do, when you were bored, or if it's pissing down from the heavens. And at that point, your mate would invite you into his house, or you would invite him into your house, and you would play games. But you never really had a favourite game, you know? You just put a game in, you played it, you enjoyed it, and it passed the time, but that was it. That was until I got a PlayStation, and I got the original Final Fantasy VII. Now, that game took me 60 hours over a 10-month period. Now, the reason it took so long to complete it is because, well, I was 13, right? I was in high school. So you went to high school, you came home, you did your homework, then you went outside to hang around with your mates, and then you got called in at night, roughly 9 o'clock. You came in, you had your bath, you put your pyjamas on, and then you would play the game for roughly half an hour, and then you would go to bed. And then you would play it a little bit more over the weekend. You get the point, right? That's why it took me 10 months to complete the original Final Fantasy VII. But when I completed it, I remember saying, this is the best game I've ever played. And at that point, that was the first game that I ever said, this is my favourite. And it stayed in the top spot for 14 years. When in 2011, I played Alan Wake on the Xbox 360, and I loved it so much that it actually knocked Final Fantasy VII off the top spot. Then, in 2018, 7 years later, I played Horizon Zero Dawn on the PS4, and I freaking loved it. And that knocked Alan Wake off the top spot. Then, 2 years later, in 2020, I played The Last of Us Part 2, and that knocked Horizon Zero Dawn off the top spot. And then, 5 years later, in 2025, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has knocked The Last of Us Part 2 off the top spot. And we have come full circle, guys, because the first game that I ever classed as my favourite game was the original Final Fantasy VII, and now, how many years later is that? 28 years later, guys, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has once again reclaimed that top spot. The point of all this is that, like I said, it's going to be rare that I give a game an 11 out of 10. So, yeah. So before we start the review, I'm just going to throw some statistics at you. This is officially the longest playthrough on the channel, clocking in at 203 episodes. We started the playthrough on the 28th of November 2024, and we finished it yesterday on the 14th of June 2025. So that is 199 days. And then I went on to one of those websites where you paste the link of your playlist and it will tell you the total amount of hours. 165 hours. It's a long one, guys. If you were to decide to watch this playthrough, it's going to take 165 hours for you to reach the end. Crazy stuff, man. Now, the reason this playthrough took so long to complete is because this is actually one of those rare, unique situations where you probably won't see this on the channel ever again, right? When we started playing the game, we checked to see if we could push for the platinum. We decided that we weren't going to go for the platinum because there was a trophy that required us to complete the game on the hardest difficulty. Now, if you've watched any of this playthrough or even the previous game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, you will see that we struggled with the combat. This is not turn-based combat like the original Final Fantasy VII. This is a completely different combat system that I was never able to fully master, especially in the previous game, which is why during the final boss fight with Sephiroth, I died multiple times. I genuinely struggled. With this game, however, Rebirth, because the playthrough was so long, I had more time to spend with the combat system. And I wouldn't say that I eventually mastered the combat, but I became competent. So competent, in fact, that when we entered the final boss section of the game, I genuinely did not struggle. Does that mean we're competent enough to attempt hard mode? No. Now, normally what happens when we decide that we're not going to go for the platinum is we'll just play through the game as normal, and once we complete it, that's us finished and we move on to the next one. But when we got like quarter of the way into the playthrough, I was like, do you know what? This game is actually really, really good, like amazing. I'm genuinely liking this. And when we got to the halfway mark, I was like, do you know what? This game's a masterpiece, 10 out of 10. This is now my new favourite game. That's right, I decided halfway through the playthrough that I was going to give this game an 11 out of 10. And it was also at that point that I made the conscious decision that I wanted to do everything that there was to do in the game before we complete it. Because like I said earlier, if we're not going for the platinum, once we finish it, we are done. Right? Now, we would normally only attempt to 100% the game if we're going for the platinum. But because we're not going for the platinum, I still want to 100% it, and that's what's rare and unique about this, right? I wanted to do all the side stuff, all the odd jobs, all the mini games, all the activities on the map before we pushed for the end game. And thankfully, there is a point of no return. The game does tell you that if you continue playing the game from this point, you'll be locked into endgame and you won't be able to do any more side stuff until you finish the game. So I wanted to make sure that I had everything done before we push for the endgame, and that is why the playthrough took so long. And now let's get into the actual review, guys. This is one of the best games that I've ever played, hands down. Freaking masterpiece, right? And this is how a remake should be done. developers should sit forward and take notice, right? And we've played quite a lot of remakes on this channel, right? The Last of Us Part 1, Dead Space, Silent Hill 2, Resident Evil 2, 3 and 4. We've played a lot of remakes and they were all fantastic, but they were faithful remakes to the original game, right? They didn't really change much in terms of story, character. They didn't really add very much to the game. They just made it look better, right? So I sometimes ask myself, would they not have been better just doing a remaster? You know, where they give the games an HD polish and make it 60 FPS, you know? I just think that if you're going to take the time to rebuild a game from the ground up, you should really expand upon the original game, you know, and have fun. And that's exactly what Square done. There was probably a lot of things that Square wished they did with the original, but they couldn't do it because they didn't have good enough tech back in those days, right? So they've taken the story of the original Final Fantasy VII, and like I said, they've expanded upon it, and they're going to tell that story over 3 games. They're going to tell it over a trilogy, right? And there was even, like, someone had told me, right, that I should have played the game Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core before I played Rebirth. And they're right, because there was characters in this game, and I was like, who the hell is that? They weren't in the original game. Who is this? Who's that? What the fuck? I've never seen these characters before. You know? And they were talking about things that made absolutely no sense to me. Stuff that I don't think was in the original game. And then someone told me, no, if you had played Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, you would know who these characters are. You would know what they're talking about. So, it is what it is. And if you remember the graphics in the original game, right? Like, you sort of had like a camera in the corner of your room, and it was like looking down. You know, it's like almost like a bird's eye view. You were sort of looking down on the characters, looking down, you know. And I was like, that's cool and all that. And then when you look at the character models, right? I mean, they're cute, right? And when you look at them, you get a little bit nostalgic. But they were pretty shit. Let's face it, right? Well, in Remake, honestly, guys, props to the art department, because they done a phenomenal job with the character models. They are literally perfect. I don't like to use that word too much, but in this instance I think it fits perfect. They could not have done a better job with those character models if they tried, right? And they even got voice actors to voice these characters, and they all done a smashing job, especially Aerith. The voice actress for Aerith was just, honestly, she should have won an award. It was that good, right? And I imagine that the developers wanted to put voice acting in the original, but just didn't have access to the tech. But it's not just that, not just the characters, guys. The towns, the villages, the settlements. Oh my god. In the original, right, I distinctly remember this town called Cam. Kalm, right? And you go to Cam after the motorway sequence where you're trying to escape Shimra on the motorway. You're on this motorbike and you're hitting Shimra guards off their bikes, and then when you get to the end of the motorway, you've got this big boss fight. And I always remember the boss was weak against lightning, so if you had lightning materia, you were pretty much going to win the fight. And then after you defeat that boss, the first town that you visit is Cam. But in the original, it was cute. But like I said, the camera was just in the corner looking down. It wasn't very immersive. But in the remake, oh my god. When we visited the town of Cam, it was just this living, breathing city. So vibrant, full of colour, full of detail. And I genuinely enjoyed exploring every inch of that place, guys. And that's really a word that you could use to describe this game. Immersive. You know, and man, so like I said, this is how you do a remake. And they also added so many things to the remake that were not in the original. there were no odd jobs, right? There were no render wave towers. There was a few minigames in the original, but they added so many more minigames to the remake. There was no combat assignments, there was no Chadley's combat simulator, there was no life springs, there was no proto relics. This is all stuff that they added to the game. And yes, there was kind of an open world in the original, but it wasn't particularly good. It was a tiny wee open world. We just ran from location to location, you know. This game introduced a genuinely massive open world game, and honestly guys, I loved it. Now my favourite type of game, right, is story driven games, and I've always said that a good story needs good characters in order to work. Well, this game has both great story and great characters, and I will even go as far as to say that I think that's one of the biggest selling points about this game is the characters. And as I said earlier, the art department done a fantastic job with the character models, and Square have done this amazing job of making you care about all the characters, not just the good guys, but the bad guys and the side characters as well. Do you have any idea how hard that is to pull off? So you've got your good guys, right? You've got your main group, your main crew, right? There were 9 main characters in the original, and there's 9 main characters in the remake. So you've got Cloud, you've got Tifa, you've got Aerith, you've got Barrett, you've got Red 13, you've got Yuffie, Kate Sith, Vincent, and Sid. Now, you can't actually play as Sid or Vincent in this game. I imagine they're just going to save that for the third game in the trilogy, which is fine, you know. You need to have some sort of selling point, so adding 2 new playable characters that you can actually control in the third and final game, that's a selling point. That'll make people want to actually buy the game. And you spend so much time with these characters, right? They become part of your everyday life. They become almost an extension of your family, right? And they all have backstories, and as you're playing through not just this game but the previous one as well, you learn about their backstory and you start to care about them. As I said at the start of this review, guys, I like to immerse myself and invest in every game that I play. I like to invest in the characters, and when you do that, you care about them, right? Even when it comes to the bad guys. So you've got Sephiroth, right? He's the main bad guy, right? He's just pure out and out evil. But he also has a backstory. And see, once you get into that backstory, you almost start to feel sorry for him. You start to empathise with him, even though he's literally trying to bring about the end of the world, right? And then you've got Rufus, who is in charge of Shinra Incorporated. And then you've got the Turks, Seng, who is the leader of the Turks. Then you've got Reno, Rude, and new recruit Elena. And as much as they made my life hell in this game and the previous one, I just freaking love them. I think they're brilliant, right? And then you've got Hojo, who in my opinion is the most evil character in the entire game. The atrocities that he committed, the hideous, horrendous experiments that he carried out, the monstrosities that he created. A lot of what is happening in this game can be attributed to his actions. And then you've got the lovely, sexy Scarlet. I know I'm supposed to hate her because she's evil and she's done a lot of evil, but she's just so insanely hot, I can't help it. And then you've got Heidegger, and then you've got Don Corneo, that sleazeball from the Wall Market. There's probably so many more bad guys, but I just can't think off the top of my head, you know. But I genuinely loved all the bad guys. They all had character, they all had personality, they all have backstories. You can relate, you can empathise, you can sympathise. And then you've got all the side characters as well. You know, you've got the lovable but hapless Johnny, who is just trying to make a name for himself, but nothing ever seems to work out for him. But when something does work out for him, you root for him. You want him to succeed, you know? And then you've got Kyrie, She's so cute and adorable, but she's an absolute obnoxious pain in the arse. She made her life hell in this game, but again, I just love her character. Who else? You've got Dio, the part director at the Gold Saucer. You've got Leslie, who worked for Don Canale but ended up defecting, and he's got a pretty intense backstory. He's trying to, was it his sister or was it his? I can't remember if it was his sister or if it was his girlfriend he was looking for, but he was trying to find someone, you know, and every time we bumped into him, we asked him, have you found this person that you're looking for? Things like that, you know. Who else? And then you've got Dine, Barrett's best friend, and Dine is attached to Barrett's past, you know. Yeah, honestly, guys, I could go on and on listing characters, but the point is, characters are one of the things that I love about this game, you know, and Square done a phenomenal job. Now let's talk about the story. Now, with regards to the story, Rebirth is the second game in the trilogy. So if you haven't played the first game in the trilogy, then a lot of what I say here won't make much sense. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth with the story, but I'll tell you enough, right? So the main bad guy is Sephiroth, right? And he wants to destroy the world and rebuild it in his image, right? There was this meteor that crashed to Earth, and on this meteor was this entity called Genova, right? Shinra went out and retrieved this entity. They went out and retrieved Genova and took her to one of their many secret underground research facilities, right? And they took Genova's DNA and they created Sephiroth. Now, Sephiroth, for the longest time, had no idea that he was created in a lab, right? He knew he was special. He knew he had all these powers, but he didn't know why. And then when he eventually found out that he was created in a lab and that Genova was actually his mother, he just completely snapped. And it was at that point he realised that I want to destroy the world and rebuild it in our image. Now, once upon a time ago, there was this group of ancient beings called the Cetra, or just ancients, right? And humanity wiped them out. Typical humans, right? We come across something we don't understand, so we just destroy it. No, maybe they done it because they were scared, right? That's probably what it was. But they wiped out the Cetra, and ironically, the only people capable of preventing the end of the world was the Cetra. Now, Aerith, who is a core member of our group, is the last surviving Cetra. She's an ancient, right? And Sephiroth realised that he needs two things to happen in order for his plan to be fulfilled, right? He needs to acquire the black materia and he needs to destroy Aerith. Now, once Sephiroth realised where the black materia was being held, i.e. the Temple of the Ancients, the game became about that. Sephiroth hunted far and wide for that black materia, and whenever Sephiroth went, we had to keep up with him because we cannot allow him to bring about the end of the world. Long story short, we went to the Temple of the Ancients and he was able to acquire the black materia and he was able to trigger the end of the world. Using the black materia spawns this big gigantic meteor which slowly makes its way to the Earth, and when it reaches Earth it destroys it. And he also needs to destroy Aerith, because the only people capable of stopping this meteor from reaching Earth is Aerith. So Sephiroth, if he destroys Aerith and he acquires the black materia and he activates it, that will bring about the end of the world. And that brings us to that scene, shall we say. And as I said earlier, guys, Sephiroth needs Aerith out the way to fulfill his plan, right? Aerith is the last surviving Cetra. She's the last surviving ancient, and she's the only person capable of stopping the meteor. And so, Sephiroth kills her. There are a few games, guys, that I've played over the years that have contained scenes that have destroyed me on a mental and emotional level, and Aerith's death is one of them, guys. Aerith's death was actually the first time I ever cried in a video game. This was back in 1997, when I was only 13. Aerith's death was genuinely horrifying, guys. And I had never seen anything like it up to that point. There's been a lot of scenes similar to that throughout the years. We've got like The Last of Us, right, in the prologue, Joel's daughter Sarah, right? You've got The Walking Dead, Lee and Clementine. You've even got the ending to A Plague Tale Requiem. But Aerith's death hits different, guys. So Aerith is inside the City of the Ancients, and she's praying at the altar. She's praying to her ancestors to provide aid and guidance, right? Cloud goes into the City of the Ancients after Aerith to retrieve her. He makes his way to the altar. Aerith looks up, sees Cloud, smiles, and then directly above, high in the sky, Sephiroth is coming down with his big long blade, and when he reaches the bottom, he stabs Aerith and the blade goes right through her. And there's this heartbeat in the background, and her eyes just close, and the materia that's in her hair falls out, and in slow motion it bounces on the ground, and the minute it hits the ground, Aerith's theme starts playing and the tears just start streaming down my face. I've never fully recovered from that scene, guys. That's why whenever I talk about it or whenever I think about it, I get emotional, right? So yeah, with Aerith out of the way, there is nothing to stop Sephiroth from bringing about the end of the world. So he uses the black materia, and now the comet has appeared in the sky and it's slowly making its way to Earth. And with no Cetra or no ancients to stop this meteor, it's looking pretty doom and gloom. But then after that, guys, we took the fight to Sephiroth to try and avenge Aerith, and it was truly an epic final boss fight. Like, I'm not even joking, guys, of biblical proportions. I mean, the fight took place over multiple dimensions on different planets, and it was just jaw-dropping. The graphics were just out of this world. Some of the things that I saw during the final boss fight was just otherworldly. In the end, we were able to defeat Sephiroth, but very much the same as in the first game, he was able to escape, and what we knew is that he was heading north. So naturally, that is where we are going to go. And that's essentially where the game ended. Now, we didn't actually see the blade go... We didn't actually see Aerith get stabbed. And I'm really grateful for that, guys, because I just don't think it's necessary. A lot of people were like, oh, you never really showed much of Aerith's death. I was a little bit confused at first. I was like, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, what is happening here, right? And then once we completed the game, I went onto other websites and tried to get someone to explain the ending to me. And once I found out what the ending was all about, I was like, do you know what? That really is the perfect way to send off Aerith, you know? You don't need to show that brutality, you know? I'm glad that they didn't do it. And like I said, they really did give her the perfect send-off. And then the credits roll, guys. I feel really sad that when the third game rolls around, Aerith's not going to be in it, you know. It just sucks. But yeah, so that's the story, guys. That's the story of Final Fantasy Rebirth. Now, another thing that I love about this game, besides the story and the characters, is the music. Oh my god, guys, the soundtrack to this game is out of this world. It's incredible, it's amazing. I didn't think it was possible that they could improve upon the original soundtrack, but they've done it, guys. I cannot tell you the amount of time I have listened to this soundtrack on Spotify. You know, what they've done is they've taken the original classics and they've modernised them, right? While also at the same time adding a bunch of new songs to the game, because they added some new zones to the game that I don't think were in the original. So if you're going to add a new zone, you might as well add some new music, and the new music is just as good as the original classics, because the original composer, not just of Final Fantasy 7, right, but he composed all the music, I believe, right up to Final Fantasy 10, and then he took a step back. Nobu Uematsu, apologies if I'm mispronouncing his name, guys. The man is iconic. He is legendary. When you think of Final Fantasy, you think of him because he makes the best music that you never really forget. As I was playing through Final Fantasy 7 Remake and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, I remembered all the songs. They all just came flooding back to me, you know. So, but like I said earlier, they done an incredible job with this soundtrack, and yeah. So now, one of the things that we commented on pretty early on in the playthrough was the graphics and how I felt that they weren't as good as the previous game, Remake. The cutscenes were perfect. They were fine, right? It was just the in-game graphics. I just felt that they were fuzzy, you know, a little bit blurry around the edges. So I done a quick Google search to see if I was the only person that thought this, and I wasn't. Other people also thought this game looked a little bit blurry. And I'm just wondering if the developers dialed back on the graphics a little bit so they could squeeze more into the game. I genuinely have no idea, but it is what it is. But the graphics options in-game are quality and performance. Now, if you play the game in quality, you're going to get 4K resolution, you're going to get ray tracing, and you're going to get 30 FPS. But we don't do 30 FPS anymore, guys. Once you've experienced 60 FPS gaming, you cannot go back to 30 FPS. Yes, it will look amazing, but it won't be smooth, and I want smooth gameplay. And when the game came out, there was performance smooth, but a lot of people said that performance smooth looked really shit. So in a later patch, Square added performance sharp, and it does make the game look better, right? To be honest with you guys, it was just a little bit of an adjustment. Once you actually get used to it and you start playing the game, you forget all about it and it's no longer an issue, right? But with regards to the graphics, the cutscenes were perfect, right? The in-game graphics were good. I can't complain, they were good, right? But they weren't as good as Remake. So, yeah. And the last thing we're going to talk about today, guys, is gameplay. Now, I know this has been a long review, right? It was a long playthrough, it was a big game, and we had a lot to talk about. But this is the last thing we're going to address, alright? Now, with regards to the combat, we touched on that earlier, and how there's a pretty steep learning curve when it comes to the combat. In the original, it was entirely turn-based, and those were simpler times, where your characters would stay on the screen, and you waited for your ATB bar to charge up. Once it got to the top, you could use an ability or a spell, and then it would reset, and you have to wait for it to charge up again. That was it. But they completely overhauled the combat system, and I'm glad that they did that, guys, because it makes the game feel fresh. It almost feels like you're playing an entirely different game, right? And when I got to the end of Rebirth, I felt like I was pretty decent at the combat. Like I said earlier, I was competent, but I don't think I will ever fully master the combat. Maybe you're not supposed to, but yeah. But I really like some of the things that they added. Like, I loved the folio system. There's potential for a lot of great customization, guys, so I really liked the folios. I kind of missed the weapon upgrade system that they had in the first game, but that's just my opinion. And I loved synergy abilities and synergy skills, because synergy abilities were akin to limit breaks in terms of how powerful they actually are, but limit breaks take a long time to charge up. You know, you have to be in a really long boss fight to be able to use your limit break. Whenever you deal damage or whenever you receive damage, your limit bar charges up really slowly, and when it gets to the end, you could use your limit break, and they are OP as fuck. So then Square added synergy abilities, and they are just as powerful as limit breaks, and you can actually use them a lot more frequently. You've got these little bars that appear below your health. So every time you use an ability or every time you use a spell, one little bar gets added, one little charge. And once you get a certain amount of charges, you can use a synergy ability. And to gain access to synergy abilities, you have to go into your folios and unlock new ones. And you basically just team up with somebody in your party and you just do this really cool looking ability. So I love that. And with regards to other stuff that was added to the game, there was a lot, guys. There was a lot of side stuff added to this game. But the best thing that they added to Rebirth was the open world. There wasn't an open world in Remake, but in Rebirth they gave us a fully explorable open world that consists of 6 zones or regions. And basically you had all these activities that you could do. Whenever you entered a zone, you would open up your map, take a look at the bottom left, and it would tell you all of the activities that are available in the zone that you're actually in. They also brought back odd jobs. Odd jobs are side missions and they were added in Remake, but there wasn't that many in the previous game, but they were received well and they brought the odd jobs back and they gave us so many more odd jobs, so many more side missions, and honestly they are pretty much my favourite activity in the game because some of the side missions are just as good as the main missions. So I made sure before we completed the game that we did every single side mission, every single odd job. And then there was Rem the Wave Towers. Every region had multiple Rem the Wave Towers and they act similar to Watchtowers in Far Cry or Synchronization Towers in Assassin's Creed, where once you activate the Rem the Wave Tower, it tells you all the stuff that you can do in the surrounding area, right? Then we had life springs. Whenever you activated a life spring, it gave you a little bit of lore about the zone or the region that you are actually in. And with me being a lore junkie, I was all about the life springs. There was also combat assignments where you had to fight all these rare creatures. There was proto relics. There was even the Mog Stool. Occasionally you'll come across this big gigantic mushroom, right? And you go through this little door and you are tasked with rounding up all the Muggles, but they don't make it easy for you guys. It was actually quite infuriating at times. But once you round up all the Muggles and put them in their pen, that opens up the Muggle Emporium, which is this pretty OP shop where you can spend all of your Muggle medals. Alright, then we had the Chadley Combat Simulator. And then we had all the mini-games that they added, and there was so many mini-games. With me being an absolute tryhard, I made sure before I completed the game that I got the high score on every single mini-game. And I did, guys. So yeah. And if that wasn't enough, they even added a card game, guys, called Queen's Blood. And I became addicted almost immediately. Once I figured out how Queen's Blood works, once I figured out the rules, once I figured out the mechanics, I actually became really good. And I said right at the start, I want to be the Queen's Blood champion of the world. And I did, guys. I defeated every single opponent, completed all the tournaments, I done everything Queen's Blood related. And what I love about it is there was even a storyline attached to the card game. It was brilliant. Oh, man. Square, if they were smart, see all the mini-games that were featured in this game, including Queen's Blood. They could make a separate game featuring all of those mini-games and they could expand on those mini-games and honestly make a fortune. I would happily buy a separate standalone Queen's Blood game. You know? And then you had other places where you can test your combat prowess, like the Beast Battleground, which featured one of the most infuriating, frustrating fights I've ever encountered in all of gaming, guys. Aerith versus the Fireballs, I think it's called. And then you've also got the Musclehead Coliseum, which consists of multiple rounds of combat, and each round gets harder and harder and stuff. And yeah, there was something for everyone in this game, guys, and I genuinely can't wait to see what they add in the third game. So in terms of gameplay, guys, 10 out of 10, it's absolute perfection. That's why it took so long for me to complete this game, because once we made the decision that we were going to do all the side stuff before we complete the game, even though we weren't going for the platinum, I still wanted to do all the side stuff. That's why the playthrough took so long, because there was literally so much side stuff, so much stuff added to the game. But honestly, guys, there's so much more I could talk about. I could go on and on and on talking about this, but I do have to bring the review to an end. So yeah, that's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's 11 out of 10. One of the best games I've ever played. Truly a masterpiece. Now, if you haven't watched this playthrough, but you have, for some bizarre reason, watched this review, and I have in some way tempted you into watching it, I highly recommend you to do. I would even go one step further and recommend that you watch the first playthrough, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then jump into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There's a good something like 280 odd episodes for you to get through. I know that this might not be your type of game, right? But it's not about the destination, guys. It's about the journey. It's about everything that happens in between, right? There were so many ups and downs. There were so many twists, so many turns. There were so many moments where I cried my eyes out. There were so many moments where I raged, like foaming at the mouth, bloodshot eyes, raged. And there was just so many moments where I was just so chilled and laid back, big old smile on my face, you know. And I was genuinely heartbroken when the game was finished. Because, like I said at the start, there was this disconnect. I realised there's no more Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I started getting withdrawal symptoms, like, oh no, you know, but I really hope that I'm still doing YouTube when the third and final game in the trilogy comes out. If I am still doing YouTube, then we will play it. I'm just so excited. So I will put timestamps, guys. You probably know this by now, but I've put timestamps in the video so you can watch. You can skip to different parts of the review. It's a long one. I know this, guys, right? But like I said earlier, it was a long playthrough. It was a big game, and there was so much that I wanted to talk about, right? So this is just one of those rare instances where the review is longer than it probably should have been. But yeah. If I missed anything in the review, guys, let me know in the comments below. Let me know in the comments below. If you've played the game, right, let me know what you liked about it. Even let me know what you didn't like about it, right? And like I said, if there's anything that I missed in my review, let me know in the comments below. And let's get talking. Let's create a wee discussion. Yeah, so anyway, guys, if you enjoyed the review, hit the like button. If you want to ask me anything, leave a comment, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next game. Bye. Oh, no, fuck off, you swine, you fucking get it. Oh, it's the cultist zombies, the ones that take forever to die. Oh no, guys, get off my fucking thing. Yeah, what the actual, get off fucking face.